Hey everyone, just as a quick reminder for those of you who may not have heard, I have joined the Chilling family, where I'll be providing hours of spine-tingling content and narrations exclusively on the app, and I want to make sure you take advantage of the free trial if you haven't yet. Chilling is the new home of horror and an amazing mobile app that allows you to do things that are just not possible on YouTube, with hundreds of unique and amazing stories that are sorted into curated playlists, or you can create your own. We give you so much flexibility to listen the way you want. This includes a Chilling exclusive feature, our ambient menu. Change the background noise of the story at will to fit your mood. From rainstorms to crackling fires, it's an absolute game changer. Of course, this is offered completely and totally ad-free. That's right, no ads, just hours and hours of uninterrupted, horrifying, creepy, and all-around spooky content. And we're just getting started. Not only are we adding hours of new content every week, but we're soon going to expand into classic novels and audio series. Original video content is also in the works, and we feel we're really building something special here. I couldn't be more excited to have the opportunity to be a part of this journey, and I hope you can join us. Download Chilling now and start your free trial today. Then keep the scares rolling with hours of continually expanded and exclusive content at your fingertips, ad-free, for $2.99 a month. Click the link in the description below or simply search Chilling in the App Store. I work in food service, front of house, so in the early days of the pandemic with restaurants closed, I was taking work wherever I could find it. An old friend clued me into a medical office that needed someone to come in and do a bit of light filing. I was able to go in at night to limit direct contact with people, so I jumped at the opportunity right away. Ironically, the medical office job had been the safest gig I'd been offered thus far, COVID-wise. I wanted to avoid the bus if I could due to crowds, so I decided to swing for a rideshare app. It's not all that expensive in my area, and I really didn't want a virus. I headed in at almost 3 a.m. because it was after the cleaning crew had left. I was kicking myself for being so cautious though because I was exhausted. I stumbled onto the block looking for my ride and, to my tired self's great relief, the car spotted me almost immediately and pulled up asking, "Uber?" While I cluelessly wandered up and down the street searching. The ride was taking a while, but I'd only just moved here last year, so I'm not familiar with all of the surrounding areas and thought nothing of it. I was pretty alert at first, so I was trying to pass the time playing games on my phone and stuff. But the car didn't have a compatible phone charger and I wasn't sure the building would have one, so I wanted to save my battery to be able to call a ride back. I shut my phone down into airplane mode and eventually drifted off from a combination of tiredness and boredom. I don't often take rideshare, so being alone with a strange driver often put me on a bit of edge, but this guy had a pretty boring car and a very standard look about him. He looked a little like my brother even. Young, clean-kempt, listening to jazz. Nothing that screamed, "You need to micromanage this trip." When we arrived, the driver tried to wake me up by calling me from the front, but I was in too deep of a sleep and couldn't fully distinguish it from a dream. Finally, he awkwardly jimmied my leg to wake me up and kept saying, Ma'am, we're here now." I was so embarrassed that I'd been that out of it, so I just gave a hurried thanks and booked it out of the car and into the building. As I looked around, I began to realize nothing was what I had expected of an office park. I had seen a street view of the building when I first looked up the business, and it appeared to be a strip mall plaza. The further I went, the more loudly alarm bells were ringing in my gut. The structure was semi-dilapidated, and it was pitch dark past the entryway. I expected some lights to be off in the nighttime, but not to the whole building. I skidded across the concrete foundation comprising what was left of the lobby area, told myself they must just be renovating, and followed signs for the stairs. After what felt like ages, but what was likely just a few minutes, all I had passed was construction equipment, a couple locked doors, and some smashed windows. I was certain I was not going to find a medical office and figured maybe I had mixed up the address. I took out my phone to double check, but once I got it out of airplane mode, I could barely get a signal. I kept moving around the building, pacing, looking for a stronger signal. I eventually confirmed in my text that I had written down the correct address just by scrolling back, which didn't require service. Since I had only been inside for a few minutes at most, I figured I should try and get in touch with the driver, because if I entered the correct address, then it was only fair he should continue my ride to the correct place and save me the added fees of calling a second trip, considering this was all his mix-up. The app was taking forever to load with my slow service, but before I could get to a cloud of reception, I heard a rustling sound in the lower level of the building. It was on the top floor, and the only stairwell I was aware of was the one I had taken up. So, this would force me into the middle of the building. There was no way to exit the situation without encountering whoever was downstairs. In an abandoned building in the late hours of the night, I figured the chances were high that it was a tweaker, and I had no desire to try slipping past a tweaker, especially when it was late enough that they were probably on something, jumpy and on edge. I tried to get a text out to a group of friends with my address and a request to call 911 to help get me from the property, because I didn't feel safe walking in that neighborhood at night and didn't have enough reception to call a new ride. But the message wasn't sending. Reception was too weak. So I gave up on getting my phone going and started checking for another stairwell, or even window with balconies or dumpsters that could be used to exit the second floor at a last resort, in the event whoever was downstairs came upstairs. I scrambled over to a door with a stairs sign on it, but the stairs were completely dilapidated and it was essentially just a straight drop down to the first floor. At that point, the worst-case scenario began to unfold. I heard whoever was downstairs begin making their way up the stairs. I thought fast and figured based on my walk about the floor was basically a giant loop, so I would have to wait for whoever this was to come up the stairs, wait for them to come all the way up, and then sprint the opposite direction of wherever they were going to try to get down the stairs and out of the building in time to make it to the road without encountering them. I was not anticipating being chased or anything, but didn't want to anger a druggie or have a homeless person who might be living there feel as though I'd trespass and become hostile towards me, or have any sort of interaction that could possibly occur at that hour in an abandoned industrial park. I held my breath for what felt like 5 minutes, but was likely closer to just 30 seconds, and the person appeared at the top of the stairs. To my great relief, it was just the Uber driver. I figured he had come back for me, realizing he had left me in the wrong spot, a place that could have worked out to be dangerous. So I came out from the beam I was hidden behind and started to wave him down. But then I processed. There was no way for him to realize this had been the wrong address. My stomach lurched forward and my blood chilled to slush. I made eye contact with him very briefly, and he was completely calm and composed, but breathing pretty heavily and blocking the stairwell down. On a normal, rational day, as an outside observer, I could think of a dozen innocent reasons he might have returned, but in the moment, standing across from him, I just knew in my gut that this was someone with ill intent. I can't remember much from the ensuing few minutes. Operating solely on muscle memory and instinct, I Superman dove from the second stairwell's opening and just let myself fall down the drop. Thankfully, I don't think he'd seen where I'd gone at first, and thought that I was in too much pain to know it then. Plenty was bruised, but nothing was completely broken. I scrambled up and threw myself at anything that seemed like it could be the door. It was too dark to tell. I was disoriented from the fall, and I wasn't in a calm enough mindset to think to use my phone's flashlight. Plus, in hindsight, some part of me probably knew it would call too much attention to my location. Just before I was able to reach the door, it flew open with a blinding light beaming straight into my eyes. My first thought, though not totally coherent, was, there's another one of these guys. And I stumbled backwards, trying to find something to hide behind. Before I could, a voice called out, "All right, this is the police department. Everyone on your knees and get your hands in the air." I didn't believe it was the police at first. I was in such a fight or flight mode and had already committed to flight that I continued looking for ways to get out. But he kept shining the flashlight right at me as I teetered around and yelled, "Hey, I said on the ground right now. Hands out. Hands out where I can see them." He sounded so authoritative that I just automatically did exactly as he asked. He approached me and finally shined the light away from me. It took a second to get my night vision, but once I did, I could see he really was a police officer. I tried to explain what was happening, but first he started asking me all these questions, and that, combined with what had just happened, and my fear of the driver coming back, all snowballed into my being unable to form a single articulate sentence. He was even asking easy questions too, like, "Can you tell me your name? Do you have any knives, needles, or anything that you could poke or cut me? Would you rather talk here or outside?" My total stunned babbling in response at first led him to believe that I was on something. He directed me out to his car, and once I was safely out of the building, I was able to start getting my bearings just a little. I sat on the edge of the back seat of the squad car with the door open facing out, while he stood across from me and asked the same questions again. The first thing I could think to ask was, "Did my friends call you? What did they tell you?" And he explained no, nobody called him, and he was patrolling the area and noticed a car idling outside of this building that's known to be condemned, and nobody's supposed to be inside. And as he put it, when they are, they're usually up to no good. He was launching into a speech about how I'd gone to shoot up or meet a John, that he had resources he could direct me to, and this was not an ideal place to do either of those things, and asking if I had somewhere safe to stay the night. But I was stuck on something else he'd said. Finally, it all clicked. The car. I spilled my whole rideshare story in a frantic word vomit. He looked around and the car wasn't there anymore. The officer guessed the guy had driven off while we were talking inside the building. He asked me all the details I remembered, and I told him, but there weren't many. I'd been too tired when the ride started to track much, but the officer realized I could pull up my Uber app and get all the information. There wasn't really enough reception there, even outdoors, so we sped down the road, and once I had enough bars, the app roared to life, and I had 4 missed notifications from Uber. They said, "Hello, I've arrived, and I don't see you. Can you confirm the pickup address is correct? And I'm flashing my hazards, and finally, unfortunately your driver had to cancel." At first I thought the driver was so cunning as to pick me up while sending these fake messages and canceling so the GPS wouldn't track us, knowing I wouldn't notice because I was asleep with my phone off, and exonerating himself. But instead I checked the car details, checked again, and it was definitely not the same driver. The person who'd driven me there had not been my Uber. The driver was somewhere else on the street when this guy pulled up to me. The policeman took my statement and said that they would keep an eye out for the guy, but the best I could give them to go off of was basically a young-looking Caucasian male with brown hair, sideburns, goatee, and 4-door sedan, wearing a zip-up sweatshirt, maybe had a hood, which is like 1 out of every 4 guys in the city. I feel so blessed to have survived this near miss. Suffice it to say, I do not take rideshare services anymore. Quadruple check your license plate and driver name. You just truly never know. It all started with a normal day at work. I worked at a small grocery store at the time, and my duties consisted of gathering shopping carts in the parking lot and bagging groceries. Normal minimum wage stuff. It was rainy that morning, and of course I was assigned to carts all day. About 2 hours into my shift, I saw a man rushing to get his groceries into the car. It was pouring. I ran over to him and started helping him with his bag. "Oh, it's pouring," I said. "Mind if I help you get out of the rain?" "Yes, thank you so much." As he was closing his trunk, he looked at me with a very surprised look on his face. He lowered his eyebrows, looked me up and down, and smirked. "Are you a new hire?" "No, I've been here a couple of months." "Oh, you're very pretty," he said in a very sensual tone. "Thank you. Have a good day." I shut it down. I was not interested. And as I was walking back to the store to hide until he left, I could feel him watching me while I walked away. Nevertheless, I continued to work, not really thinking about it. After my lunch, I was at the register bagging groceries, and I noticed that same man from earlier walk in. I pretended I didn't see him and just kept bagging. He came up to the register and got a single chocolate bar. I didn't give him a bag. He stands towering over me and says, "Aren't you going to bag my item?" "Oh, sorry, I didn't know you wanted a bag for one thing." I put his chocolate bar in a bag and told him to have a good day. "When are you off work, sweetheart?" Man, I'm not comfortable giving that information out." He returned with, "That's okay. You've been here what, 5 hours? You probably get off around 6 or 7, right?" He smiled, winked at me, and walked away. Disgusted, I went to my manager and told her what happened. She told me not to work that lot anymore and to ask someone to walk me to my car. So by the end of my shift, I made a male coworker walk me to my truck and we scanned the parking lot, looking for this man's car. I didn't see him, so my coworker went back inside and I started my truck. I called my mom to tell her about what happened, and once she answered, I left the parking lot. Literally the second I turned onto the road, I saw his car pull onto the road behind me. I told my mom I thought he was going to follow me, and she just told me to drive around a bit to try and lose him. I drove around for about 20 minutes just going in circles around my town. I hit a red light and he pulled up next to me and started yelling something to me out his open window. I, of course, pretended he wasn't there, but I could still hear what he was saying. "You would bear some good kids for me. You'd make a great slave for me, little lady." He then started being very explicit about what he was going to do to me if he caught me. I told my mom I was going to call 911, and if I wasn't home in an hour, then call the police. While I was trying to dial 911, the man speeds ahead of my truck and starts brake checking me. Frantic, I wait for the closest intersection and turn up the block. My phone fell under my seat while I was turning, so I decided to go to the nearest open establishment and run in and hide and have someone else call 911. The closest open business I could find was a convenience store at a gas station. I pull in, park, and run for my life into the store. I tell the clerk what's happening and she takes me to the break room and locks me in there. While processing that I might have survived this ordeal, I hear the doors of the storefront start violently rattling, and before I knew it, the clerk was locking herself in the break room too. She was on the phone with the police and they were on their way. We were silent, cowering in a dark room, and I found myself feeling guilty for wrapping another woman into our worst fear. My thoughts were racing through what I had said to him. Did I lead him on? No, I just told him to have a good day. Has he been following me for longer than tonight? How did he know what car I drive? Are the police going to get here in time? Are we going to die? Finally, the small room is illuminated with red and blue lights from the crack under the door. We hear a voice over the intercom tell us it's safe to come out. Shaking, the clerk takes out her keys and opens the door. We walk out and give our statements. After the police leave, I turn to my unexpected savior and profusely thank her. We cry, hug, and she walks me to my car. The next night I went back and brought her some food and an Amazon gift card. I've been in a near-fatal car accident, 10 feet away from a mountain lion in the wild, and I am a survivor of assault. I can tell you, reader, with total honesty, I thought that was the end of my line. When I was about 9 years old, female, my family used to live in a remote area on the outskirts of town. Considering the location of the suburb, that area was surrounded by warehouses and such. At the time, my family did not have a phone in the house, and neither did our neighbors. There were no cell phones back then, or they were a luxury and not everyone could afford one. This took place in the end of the 90s. So if I needed to call my mom while she was at work, I had to either go to my dad's work or a company next to his, which was closer, to make a phone call. My dad's work was a relatively short walk from our house, probably about 30 minutes or less. My dad was working at a huge unloading dock for metallurgical and natural resources shipments. In order to get to my dad's work, I had to walk past another adjacent company just like the one where my dad was working. I will call that Docks 2. My dad's work, as well as Doc's too, had a sort of watchtower. It is just a cabin mounted at the top of a tall platform, and you need to go up a decent amount of stairs to get to the top. There was always a guard inside overseeing the whole yard from the top during the day and night to make sure no one is in danger and there's no break-ins. The phones were located only on-site watchtowers at the time. Docks too were much closer to our house, about a 10 minutes walk. Now one day, as I've done many times before, I went to the docks too to make a call. I climbed the stairs, knocked on the door, and was welcomed in by a guard I used to see quite often and knew well. However, that day he wasn't alone. There was a new guy, 28 at the time, and he was there. Apparently he was a new employee hired to work shifts. He was this very tanned white guy, always wearing military-style outfits. I was just an average-looking child, exactly my age. My hair was very blonde, which made my cheeks always appear rosy red and give me even more childish appearance. When the new guy saw me that day, he wouldn't take his eyes off me. As soon as I was about to finish my call with my mom, it's just one room so everyone can hear my conversation with her, the new guy went outside to smoke. When I came out, he smiled at me and asked me what my name is and whether I came there often to make calls. I don't remember what I said, but I felt very shy because he was just staring deeply into my eyes. I'll just call him the creep. Fast forward, and I came to that tower again to make a call. And there he was again, but that time he was alone. I spoke to my mom, and as I was about to leave, he asked if I wanted any tea, to which I refused. He then proceeded to ask how my school was going and things like that. He offered to help me with my homework. However, I told him I've got it all sorted. Harmless, but strange to say the least. On a side note, I just wanted to say that what gave me shivers when I was near him is that whenever he looked at me, he looked drunk, which was very unsettling. Mind you, he wasn't actually drunk, but his eyes would get so hazy and his face would flush red. Sometime later, I saw him again. That time I was walking to my dad's work with my friend, and he was doing some digging in the docks too. When he saw me through the metal fence that was separating us, he just leaned against his shovel and just stared at me. He didn't say hi or anything like that. After those encounters, for quite some time, I took alternative routes to see my dad or play with puppies at my dad's work or make calls to my mom, because he really creeped me out. However, one day I had to call my mom urgently. My dad's work phone didn't work, so I had to go to the Docks 2 tower, hoping I won't see him. The creep was there. And oh boy, he was so happy I came. He was complaining how I don't come anymore to see him. And as I was making the call, he grabbed another chair and sat right next to me very close. It took a while for the call because my mom was busy with something and someone went to get her whilst I was on the line. It felt like hours waiting, and the creep was just sitting next to me, looking at me and still smiling. When the mom finally got to the phone, he got up and went to make some tea and brought some biscuits. When I was done talking, he insisted I have some tea with him. I didn't, and he just kept on trying to strike a conversation. But this time, the tone of the conversation was different. He asked me how old exactly I was, and I told him 12 or 13. I have no idea why I lied that I was older than I was, since I was 9. He told me his age, and although I knew he was much older, I felt really weirded out that he wanted to talk to me so badly or had any interest in being my friend. My alarms did go off every time I was around him, but I guess I didn't really feel overly in danger. He then proceeded to tell me that I was beautiful and asked me whether I had a boyfriend. He asked me if I have already dated boys and what type of boys I liked. I was so uncomfortable and so eager to leave at that point, but he would just keep dragging me into those weird conversations. I could tell he was drinking that day. When I began moving towards the door, he followed me. Eventually we were both outside, however. In order to get down from the tower, you need to walk this narrow path towards the stairs. He stood blocking it so I couldn't leave. He got very close to me and I freaked out. The only escape tactic I could come up with as a child was to pretend that I'm seeing someone from the top of the tower. So I began waving my hand at the road down the bottom and towards houses in the distance, pretending I see someone I know and saying, "Oh look, That's my uncle. He's waving at me." The creep looked in that direction, but either didn't care or could tell that I was lying. I kept on telling him that my uncle who waved back is a big angry man and that if I won't come down this instant and go home, we both are going to be in trouble. He didn't budge. He got even closer and eventually pressed me against the railing. He kept on asking me weird questions whilst I was terrified to move because I didn't want to move my body against his, if that makes any sense, so I just froze. He asked me if I would come on a date with him and that he's looking for a girlfriend. And at that particular moment, someone was coming up the stairs to the tower, so he let me go, but asked me to come back. I have not told anyone about this encounter at that stage because I was afraid that my parents would get angry. I also felt very embarrassed and thought that people would judge me for what happened. Sometime later, I was home and it was around 9 p.m. I know the time because it was my bedtime. Suddenly, a car came into our driveway. I came to see who it was through the front room window, and I could see it was the creep, but this time with other guys, blasting music in his car and shouting my name. I have no idea how he knew where I lived. He must have followed me one day. My dad was outraged. He asked me who these people were, but before I could even answer, he rushed outside. Apparently, the creep asked for me to go out with him and his friends. My dad obviously refused, saying that I'm a child and too young to hang out with them or go out at this time of night, and that if he sees any one of them ever again, he'll beat the living daylights out of them. So, they took off. I was so upset with my dad that he had called me a child in front of them. So stupid looking back. I think because we lived so far away from everything, I was really keen to make friends as there were no kids around as such. For a while after that, I hadn't seen the creep or heard of him. A significant time later, I was walking to my dad's work again, and I've completely forgotten about that guy. He was working in the docks too with his friends, maybe those that came with him that night in the car, or maybe these were just his coworkers. I got scared when I saw him and even thought he shouted hi, and I pretended not to know him. He said something to his friends, and I remember so clearly how one of his friends exclaimed loudly, "Her?" I guess he had told them about me or his interest in me, but no one had expected me to be a child. I looked at the guy that exclaimed. He was staring at me in utter disbelief. He must have been 20 to 25, I think, and the creep was saying something to him. His friends screamed to him, "Have you lost your mind?" Clearly the creep didn't see me as a child like everyone else did. Fast forward again, maybe half a year later. One day I'm home alone in the evening waiting for my parents to come home from work. We lived in a very safe community, so sometimes I'd be home by myself for a little bit after school till my parents got home. I was playing a game whereby I was a singer. I had this sort of makeshift stage created in the living room, and I was performing in front of the chairs, pretending the chairs were filled with a live audience. It was pitch black outside. At some point during my performance, I see someone staring at me through the living room window. That person must have been crouching down, as only the top of their face could be seen from the bottom. As soon as that person realized I saw them, they ran away. I was so embarrassed that someone saw me performing, and scared and shocked at the same time, that I was literally glued to the floor. I don't know whether that was him. Our dog didn't react at all, maybe because music was playing very loud. I was scared to go outside the house to check, but peered through the window. However, no one was there. That person had to climb over a wooden fence to get to our living room window. I told my parents about it. I've also asked my friend whether it was him who had came around, but he said it wasn't him. I don't know if my friend felt shy to admit he was watching me or whether it actually was that creep. But to finish up the story, one day I went to the docks too with my dad, as my dad needed something from there for work. I saw the old guard that I knew well and asked about that creep and was told that he doesn't work there anymore. I honestly don't know what happened to him, and I never told my parents to the extent of what happened. This story takes place when I was around 16 to 17 years old. I lived with just my dad in a little apartment in a questionable area. It was the type of area you'd not want to be out and about when the sun goes down. Up until a certain time, like 10 to 11 p.m., there would be a cop or two in the area patrolling and making sure there's no gang activity going on. I had a job at a restaurant in the city, which was about a 30-minute car ride and an hour-and-a-half train ride. The train was a couple of blocks away from my place since my dad was always too lazy or hungover to drive me, and that was my main form of transportation. I went to work at around 3 p.m. and would usually get home at around 12 or 1 a.m. This was my schedule 4 days a week aside from having school. I would see a lot of familiar faces on the train because of this, but we never really made conversation with each other. Until one night, when I got out of work late because some idiots wanted to sit in the restaurant past closing. You know those people. And thanks to them, I missed my train. The next one wasn't scheduled to arrive for another hour, so having nowhere to go and no money left for Lyft or Uber, I sat there waiting. No one was around me, so when this older man showed up, kind of staggering a bit, I assumed he was another drunken hobo in the city trying to catch a train to sleep in. Something about his face gave me déjà vu, but I shrugged it off, thinking maybe I've just seen him on the train here and there. He made his way over to me, much to my discomfort, and started up a conversation. He wasn't slurring, but the way he was looking down at me gave me goosebumps. He asked me why I was out there so late, all by myself. I had to reply as to not anger him. I mean, we were alone and he was close enough to me to pull out a knife or something. I had no idea. Anyway, I told him I was waiting for the train and he asked which one. Now, the train was color-coded with a strip at the top to indicate whether it goes north, south, east, or west areas. And I took blue, but I lied and said I took green. He looked at the schedule above the benches and saw that the green train was coming in 15 minutes, so he said that he'd keep me company. For those extremely long 15 minutes, he asked me how long I had been working at so-and-so restaurant, and this made my blood run cold as ice. I never told him where I worked. I just looked at him and very timidly answered, "For a year?" And he laughed, and he responds, "Wow, it's already been a whole year, huh?" At this point, my skin was itching out of anxiety, and as soon as the green train came, I knew I had no choice but to take it. I said goodbye to him and thanked him for the chat, hoping that would be the end of it. No. He suddenly told me that he took the green train too, so he followed me on and sat in a seat behind me. My mind was racing about whether he was going to try to do something to me like chloroform or hurt me in some other way, but we rode the train in silence. I was trying to figure out how I was going to lose him. There weren't many other people riding the train at that hour. Our car was empty, unfortunately. As the ride went on in menacing silence, I could feel him staring down the back of my neck. I waited until we got to a stop where there was another person, and I was so relieved to see a woman sitting there. She wasn't boarding, so I immediately got off the train and the man followed me, as expected. I took a seat on the bench next to hers, close enough for her to see and hear everything going on, hoping she would catch on. The man notified that I was sniffling, allergies, and being out in the cold, and asked if I was sick. I told him no, but he insisted on giving me these weird pills that he had that were supposedly cold medicine. I declined in a louder voice. Sorry. Don't accept pills from strangers." This prompted the lady to look at us, and I made eye contact with her, and she knew now. Now, this went on until a blue train came and the lady got up, giving me a look that told me to get on with her. So without explanation, I did. She waved me over to sit next to her, and when the man tried to follow, she said, "No, you go sit over there," and made him sit a couple of seats across from us. He chose the one where he could face us and stared at me the entire time. I was shaking and about to burst into tears. The woman leaned over and whispered to me that she had a pistol, and I felt safer with her there. We whispered back and forth about what happened. I told her where I lived and how I was worried he would follow me home. She told me a friend of hers would be boarding the train soon, and when he did, she told me his name was Ray. Ray was filled in about everything and agreed to escort me home. She promised me that I could trust him. The two of them waited with me until I got to my stop. The man, still watching me, started to smile widely, resembling the Cheshire cat. He shouted, "This your place, right?" To which I didn't respond and just gave the woman a hug and thanked her. Ray and I hurriedly hopped off the train, and as I looked back, I saw that the woman had pulled out her pistol and told the man to sit back down, even blocking the exit with her body. I finally let myself cry in relief. Ray walked me home and tried to calm me down by telling me about his job and his family. After watching me get inside the gates of my apartment safely, I thanked him profusely for his help. It chills me to think about how that night would have turned out if I hadn't met up with that woman and her friend. I feel extremely lucky to this day. I never saw that man again and eventually stopped thinking about him, but in the back of my head, that creepy, aroused smile of his was burned into my mind, and I couldn't help but wonder just what else he knew about me. It's hard for me to write this out because it has only been a year since it stopped. It started in 2014 and it happened in my home country of Sweden when I went to an art school for a summer course as a form of daily activity. The people at this art school were some of the worst people I'd ever met, and that included me because I was kind of trash back then too. I was 21 years old and had little experience of the real world. I had gone 2 extra years of schooling because of switching majors and taking an extra year on my second choice, so I was literally on my first year of independence. I also had a light form of autism and didn't receive schooling until I was 12, which made me a bit more slowly developed mentally during high school. I'm all caught up now, but basically I was a 21-year-old with very little life experience. The people I met at the art school were not, let's say, the highest of achievers. They were some of the meanest and most terrible people I'd ever met. They treated each other and me awful, and as well as the teachers, but I was quite the little turd too. In fact, I feel like being around these people also made me worse. What started the stalking was an incident involving acrylic paint. It was going to be thrown away, so some of us took some of the paint so it wouldn't go to waste, and I finally took the remaining paint. Well, it's over, showed up. Her name was Anna, and this is how she introduced herself. My art teacher was pushing these big tables on a trolley through the narrow passageway of the art hall, and Anna, dressed in expensive designer clothes, stood in her way. So my art teacher, not fearing anything, screams, "Move it." And Anna snaps towards her with this crazy look in her eyes and shouts, "Excuse me? Do you know who I am? I'm a famous woman." My art teacher, not impressed, responds with, "Okay, famous woman, move it." That was how we learned of Anna, the famous artist. She then proceeded to have all the terrible people in my class schmooze over her and treat her like a celebrity. But the real reason for being there was because of her paint. So, the great hunt began. I was roped into it, and my initial plan was to just give her back her paint so she could be off. Except during the hunt, I got these terrifying red flags. She kept sniffing the paint of other people to see if it was hers. Apparently, she had poured some kind of oil into the paint so she could sniff her way to where they were. During the hunt, she admitted that she had been put into treatment for the criminally insane because she had stalked a previous schoolmate that she thought had stolen paint from her. She even showed a CCTV video of her old schoolmate pulling a suitcase behind her, saying that that's where she had the paint that she stole. I asked her how she had got this video, that she said that her dad had connections with the local government, which had gotten the video from one of the local government's cameras, which is illegal for a layman to get access to. During this time, she also admitted that she had been sending messages to a famous artist in Örebro because a voice from heaven told her to do it, and that he was destined to help her with her career. Anna also thought that staring wide-eyed made her more attractive, like the kind of stare where you can't see any of the eyelids at all. So while she was saying all this, she had this crazy-eyed look on her face. I was terrified of her and couldn't figure out a way of handing back the paint, so she ended up threatening to have the principal fired if she couldn't search every room for the paint. And when she did find all of her paint, She put it in one of the school's rooms and said that she would pick it up when she wanted to. She said that she would come every year during the art exhibit to check if her paint was still there, and that she would sue the school if she found it missing. What a crazy person. An end of story, right? Oh, how I wish. About 2 years later, I enrolled in a 1-year basic art program at the school. I had completely forgotten about this crazy person. At one point, we were cleaning out the art rooms and her paint was brought up again, and would again be thrown away. Me, not remembering that crazy, famous artist, took a nice crimson bottle for myself, while others took some of the not ruined color, as open acrylics go bad after a while. Then, as we all tried to continue with our lives, the crazy lady one day returned and started sniffing all the color. I didn't recognize her at all and had forgotten how dangerously deranged she was. I'd even forgotten that I had gotten the crimson color from her paint, so when she started interrogating me for why the paint smelled like hers, I didn't know what to say. She also smelled her paint at some other girl's table and was harassing her as well. Thinking that this was all more fuss than it was worth, I threw away the crimson paint. It had started to cut from age anyways. And that is when everything just went absolutely nuts and crazy-eyed Anna became my stalker. When she found out that I had thrown away the paint, she became convinced that I had re-enrolled at the art school specifically to steal her paint. She started convincing a bunch of gullible and, to be honest, low-achieving people that this was true, and I started being harassed. It started with a physical attack. I was painting alone in the evening, minding my own business, when this huge brute ran into me, tackled me to the floor, and hit and kicked me. While this was happening, crazy-eyed Anna was fake crying in the corner, but I could see on the floor how she went from fake crying into gleefully smiling as I was being kicked and hit. Another girl she had recruited picked up and smashed my phone, breaking it. As the guy stormed off and the second girl followed, I stumbled onto my feet and asked Anna why she had done this, and the answer she gave me made me realize what kind of person she was. "So you will know that I can hurt you if I want." This was the answer she gave me. I later asked the brute of a person why he had attacked me, and he said that he hated people who stole. This guy is training now to become an art teacher, and I fear for those children. I had bruised my ribs, but were not allowed to go to the hospital because the principal didn't want to get involved, and since my phone was broken, I couldn't even call for an ambulance, so it took so long to get to the hospital that the outside signs of the abuse had healed. During this time, crazy-eyed Anna started wearing a crimson jacket wherever she went. I asked her why she was wearing it and also said she looked pretty, thinking that talking nicely to her would start a friendly conversation to maybe smooth everything over. Well, Anna is not like normal people and does not think like normal people. Her response was that she wanted to think of every time I saw this color and said that she had seen it work in a movie. She then added, "I am more beautiful than you will ever be." Whenever she went, she had a horde of schmoozers around her, all thinking she was some kind of famous and fancy artist. But eventually she had to leave school and I thought I had peace. Except she one day suddenly showed up and gleefully presented me with the school's Russian exchange student. This student had been sitting at my table every day for weeks and I hadn't paid it any mind. Why would I? She was allowed to sit there, but this is when the crazy-eyed Anna drops the bombshell that this exchange student was A, not a real exchange student, and B, she had been putting her phone on the table each mealtime while having it on speaker with Anna on the other end, silently listening in on my conversations. I remember when she first told me this, how I didn't believe it. I didn't believe, and a part of me still had a hard time realizing the lengths this woman was going to and that they were real. But it was what she said next that terrified me the most. She said, "I know about the secret messages behind your words. I know what you're up to. And I heard a voice from above that told me that it was my mission in life to keep an eye on you and to make sure you behave." The abuse at school escalated quickly after this. I was harassed and cornered in every classroom and chased around school, and at the same time I got zero help. It escalated into a happening one late weekend night. I was sitting in the school's texture room when a guy suddenly burst in and started running towards me screaming, "What makes you think you can sit here?" He did not go to the school. I jumped out of a window and started running towards my dorm and managed to call 112 in the meantime, the emergency number in Sweden, and managed to scream out that I needed help and where I was. I ran towards my dorm, but another guy was waiting for me there, so I ran towards the head building, but a third guy was waiting there. They cornered me, and I remembered how terrified I was. I thought I was going to die. But then there was a light of hope, blue and red lights from the road, and I was saved. I remember how happy I was to see that police officer. Everything would finally be over, and then... He walked up to the girl who orchestrated all of it, Malin, and he greeted her like a friend, and I knew it. I knew at that moment that he wouldn't save me. I screamed for help and he ignored me. She told him that there was no issue here. He said he was looking forward to seeing her around town. And then he left. He left me. He just drove away. The last thing I remember is the backlights of that police car driving away. I wake up the next morning laying on the ground with a huge bump on the side of my head. I don't know what happened. Malin claims they never touched me and I just passed out when one of the guys grabbed me. But I knew better. I know the pain I felt in the huge bump on the side of my head. I called 112 again and called for an ambulance. And this time, because of the abuse, I had memory loss and couldn't quite tell the lady what the issue was, but I made a mistake. I told her that I had called 112 the day after and that a police officer just left me. And she got mad. Really, really mad. She told me that I was slandering her coworker and to only call if I actually needed help, and then she hung up. And I was alone again, with no one, not a single person on my side. I tried to make a police report against Anna and Malin, but the officer had heard about me and deleted my report. It was during this time that I had enough and thought about ending my own life, so I was forcefully put in a mental health ward. And the stalking didn't stop. Crazy-eyed Anna had a friend of hers be committed so she could come into the ward as a visitor in order to harass me. When I tried to go to art school again, she had people she had threatened join the same program so they could keep an eye on me. At home, she would have another guy she had threatened to park outside my house a few times a week in order to scare me. During this, she would also have things stolen from me, things like shoes, gloves, and the like, and according to the people doing the stealing, this is because she had watched a movie where someone steals items and then puts them back to make someone go insane from the harassment. Crazy-eyed Anna would call me a few times a year lying about being a data collector to get private information out of me, something that took a few years to even catch on to. Because she lived in a big city far away at the time, she constantly forced others to do the stalking for her. Most of them had at one point given drugs to and then would get them to do what she wanted by threatening to report them to the police if they wouldn't. Others she just bribed with money or charmed. I have gone for hour-long bus rides where someone admits to being there for her sake. Most people are afraid of her because she won't leave them alone, and she will do to them what she does for me if they don't say yes to her. One girl was roped into standing all dressed in red outside my supermarket. Another girl was also roped into sitting with her car outside my house for a few hours, a few days a week, all because of fear of this woman. I learned from a cousin of hers that she affords all of this because she won an art prize for 500,000 kroner at one point. That's why she thinks she's famous. I also learned that most of her biological family has cut contact with her because she has been doing this since she was a teenager, and yet even with that information, no one would listen. When I tell people what she had done to me, people call me the crazy one. I have no history of delusions or of making up tall tales, yet it was so much easier for people to just think I'm crazy. I have even been forcefully medicated at some points with psychosis medication that baffled doctors lamented over not working. Not even my family believes me, something that has forever barred how much trust I can put into the relationship between us. I asked her once why she was doing all of this, and she said, "To punish you." I asked her for how long I would need to be punished, and she answered, "For as long as I want." At one point, I even considered killing her. I'm the kind of person who catches flies alive in a cup and let them out the window. I have never harmed another human being. I have never been violent. Yet at one point, I felt so desperate for freedom that I would take prison rather than being haunted by crazy-eyed Anna anymore. I was more afraid of her than imprisonment. And then, it stopped. It just stopped. Still a year later, I don't know why it stopped. Nothing in her history tells me that she would stop willingly, so I'm convinced that either she had run out of people to threaten into doing her bidding, or something has happened to her. It's possible that one of those people finally reported her and actually got taken seriously. I'm not sure. Even so, I can't feel relief. Not yet. I'm still afraid it'll start again, and I have given up all hope of being taken seriously by the police. My dad and I live together in our own multi-family home in Germany. My dad has a serious lung condition. His lungs produce and trap an excessive amount of mucus. The trapped amount is huge and keeps his lungs from working correctly. It's pretty normal that he has to be picked up by an ambulance every 2 to 3 weeks because he can't breathe anymore. Last week, it was that time of the month. He couldn't breathe. I called an ambulance and he was brought to the closest hospital. Pretty normal for me because this happened at least 10 times in the last 6 months. So I went to bed after he got picked up on a Tuesday. I went to work the next morning and got a text from him that he has to stay for at least 2 more days, so approximately till Friday. Wednesday evening, I get home from work and played as much Rogue Company when someone suddenly rang the doorbell. That's unusual because we never have unannounced visitors. I walked to the door and was about to press the door buzzer to open the main door when I heard, I believe, more than one voice directly in front of my door, so that someone just got past the main door, which was weird. I asked in German, "Hello, who is it?" And there was silence for 3 seconds. Then a person who sounds like my father but at the same time doesn't sound like my father answers, "Micah, it's me. I forgot my keys. Open the door." I thought, okay, in that case. Wait a minute. My dad never calls me Micah, only Mickey. And there was the sarcastic tone in that voice. I didn't trust the situation, and I called my father on his phone. If the person in the front of my door was my father, his phone should ring, right? It didn't. My father answered, and as I suspected, he was still in the hospital. Meanwhile, the 2 persons on the other side of the door heard my phone call and started kicking my door. "Let me in, Micah, it's your daddy. Let me in." Thank God the door was reinforced. After I threatened them with calling the police and having a huge knife in my hand, they left. I heard their footsteps running down the staircase. I rushed to a window facing the street to check if I can see a car or a license plate, but they were gone, just a few footsteps in the distance. They never came back, and what's weird is that they knew my name and that my father wasn't home despite his car standing in the driveway. Stuff was hitting the fan when a buddy of mine actually reported something similar. We called the police, but an investigation is currently in progress. For context, I'm a 25-year-old woman who is 3 months pregnant. The 2 people involved in this incident are myself and my brother-in-law, who is 19. For the sake of the story, I'll call him Jack. Now, Jack is very street smart, and on top of that, a brown belt in some martial art, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I believe, so he definitely knows how to hold his own in any difficult situation. He is the outspoken younger child in his family as compared to my husband's softer demeanor. Being only 2 siblings, my husband and Jack are very close. Jack currently lives with my husband and myself. I live in a small town in California, and the 3 of us live in a small 2-bedroom apartment. It isn't special or anything, but considering how close the 3 of us are and all the fun we have, it's home. The downside is that while we have good neighbors and everything, the neighborhood isn't that great. A lot of gang-related crimes have taken place over the years, and drug abuse is common on the streets. Now, being pregnant, I had the usual weird cravings, and on that particular night, I was dying for pickles. Naturally, we didn't have any at our place, so the plan of action was to go and get them at 1 a.m. There is a commercial area about a 25-minute walk from our apartment complex with a huge Walmart. So, that is our go-to for anything we needed. My husband was away on a business trip for the weekend, so Jack was on my beck and call for everything. I told him about my craving and he got ready to leave right away. Not wanting to stay home at the time of night, I decided to go along with him. I figured the fresh air would be good for me and I felt like I could use a walk, so off we went. It was a bit chilly that night and naturally I didn't realize it, so I had to make do in a tank top and yoga pants. That is, until Jack gave me his jacket. We had a really pleasant walk all the way to the store, talking about everything and nothing and enjoying the walk in general. We got to Walmart at around 1:25 to 1:30 a.m. and spent around a half hour there. Since I frequently visit the store a lot, I'm friendly with a few of the employees working there, so I spent some time talking to them as well. I got my pickles and a few other groceries that needed restocking. I also got a few things off my maternity checklist in case I didn't forget to do so later. Jack got a few things that he needed, and saying our goodbyes, we left. I'll admit, I'm very naive, which I think is probably because of my sheltered upbringing. We were at the edge of the parking lot of the entire commercial area when we crossed a group of 4 greasy guys in their late 20s hanging around. I caught them staring, but since I had just started showing, I didn't make much of it. There weren't many cars around either since it was very late at night. Jack and I started our journey back once again, cracking jokes and messing around with each other. He made a joke about naming my baby after him if I had a son. We were just goofing around, and little did I know how quickly that would change. Only a few minutes into our walk back home, Jack's demeanor suddenly changed. Now, I've known Jack since he was 12, and I've always known him to be very laid back and carefree. His breathing became very erratic, and he was laughing way too loud at anything I was saying, and he was twirling around like he was dancing every few seconds. I thought he was just messing around with me as I'm a dance instructor, but something just wasn't right the way he was acting. He started laughing all of a sudden and said, "I dare you to shuffle sideways across the road to the other sidewalk." I thought this was a very weird request, but since I was in a good mood, I thought why not, and just went for it. Jack followed right next to me, doing a weird little dance which didn't really make any sense. I started to giggle at him when we started walking again on the other side of the road this time. Any signs of discomfort he was showing earlier had all disappeared, so I figured he only wanted to make our tedious walk home more entertaining. Okay, now back to our side of the road. I looked at him weirdly, and he had this wide grin on his face. Once again, I couldn't say no to him, so we did the same thing back. We both were laughing like crazy, and I was in an even better mood than earlier. This time, however, I noticed that same group of 4 guys walking about 30 yards behind us. I thought it was a bit strange, but didn't think of it as being too strange. Maybe they were just going home too, I thought. About 10 minutes had passed since we left Walmart, and we had arrived near a residential area. No apartment buildings, but typical Californian homes with large backyards, etc. This particular residential area was to our left, and for our apartment, we had to go straight for at least another 2 blocks. Now this is where it starts to get creepy and straight up terrifying. Instead of going straight like we were supposed to, Jack challenged me to a race. We turned left on the end of the block, run the length of houses, and come back. This is very strange. He was adamant about it, but there was something different this time. He still had that weird laugh going on, but his eyes told a different story. He looked desperate, as if he really wanted me to say yes. I noticed those guys were still strolling behind us, which at that point were alarm bells in my head. I agreed to race, and he gave me a head start. I could see those guys staring at us out of the corner of my eye. They just stopped, and were simply looking in our direction, making me feel very uneasy. Jack made a big show of counting down from 3, and we took off. Literally 5 seconds into our race, once we were out of sight, Jack put his hand over my mouth and dragged me to the house on our left and into the bushes. I was about to scold him for cheating when he hissed at me that we were being followed. The terrified look on his face was all I needed to see to know that he was right. I felt my heart sink down into my stomach. I could feel myself throwing up any second, and I had tears welling up. There was no time for any of that though, because we heard voices almost instantly. Jack pushed me further under the bushes, and he positioned himself right next to me, both of us pretty concealed by now. Sure enough, all 4 of them had turned left onto the street, and they just stood there looking around. The streetlights were fairly dim, so it was pretty dark. One of them said, "I didn't know these knocked-up hoes could run this fast." Another guy mentioned something about how he thought the kid was onto them. What he said next sent shivers up my spine. "I got my knife here for her. She can't resist what I say with a knife on her throat. We'll dump the kid somewhere. Don't worry about that, little mongrel." I could feel my throat closing up. It got difficult to breathe by the second, but it wasn't over yet. Their sort of leader decided to look around for us. They split up and the two of them came in our direction. My heart came all the way into my throat as I literally froze. The fear of getting caught was like ice running through my veins. One of them came up and stood right next to where we were hiding and started smoking a cigarette. The other three were nearby and they were going through the neighborhood looking for us. I was sure that the guy closest to us would find us as he was only a few steps away. Jack turned to look at me and I could see the fear in his face. He raised his finger to his mouth, signaling to be extra quiet. The smoker guy was pacing around us slowly. Luckily it was dark, so that played to our advantage. After what seemed like an eternity, but was actually only 30 minutes, they regrouped in the middle. One of them made a call, telling someone to bring the car around. Another 5 minutes had gone by when the car finally arrived and the men, all looking angry, drove off. It was too dark to clearly get to the number plate, but I made a mental note of the model and color of the car. We waited for a while before getting out from the undergrowth and brushed ourselves off. I couldn't hold it any longer and I burst into tears. Jack, too, with glistening eyes, hugged me, but he didn't for long. He wanted to get home as quickly as possible before those men had any chance of coming back. We got our grocery bags, which were all muddy now, and made our way back home. I felt like they would pull up behind us at any second. Luckily, though, we made it back without any further issues. I collapsed onto the couch the minute we entered and double-checked the locks. I was sobbing my eyes out and trying not to throw up. Jack was trying to keep it together, but I felt like he would start crying any minute as well. I honestly felt so stupid and ashamed. Here I was, 6 years older than my brother-in-law, who looks at me as the older sister he never had, and he was the one consoling me. We stayed that way for a while, and when he told me to get some rest, it was almost 3 a.m. I didn't have the mental capacity to do anything else, so I just went to my room and passed out on the bed. I had a load of missed calls when I woke up from my husband. Jack had called him and told him what had happened. He told me that he would be coming back that very day, which I was very happy about. I also told Jack how grateful I was for him being with me. We have since tried to move on from the real-life nightmare, but I still feel like something is bothering me. My apartment is on the 4th floor and has a clear view of the road outside. Now, I don't know if it's my mind playing tricks on me, but I'm fairly certain I've seen those guys coming and hanging around the apartment complex at night. I've also seen them driving slowly around in what I'm sure is the same car I saw that night. I never feared for my life or felt in any sort of danger the way I have these past few days. We filed a police report, but we haven't heard anything so far. This happened many years ago. I was 8 or so at the time, and every day I would walk home from my elementary school. My house was a few miles down the road, so my mother thought it would be safe enough for me to walk by myself. It was a few months into the school year when it started happening. A beat-up looking Toyota would slow down enough for a couple of white guys that looked like they were in their mid to late 20s to follow me and yell insults. I was chubby back then, so they would call me fat and much more hurtful things. I always remember the driver. He looked to be the oldest of the bunch, with greasy blonde hair hanging down and partially covering his pimple-scarred face. They would follow me until I reached the gas station that was halfway along my journey home. Then they would speed off laughing loudly. For the first couple of weeks I didn't tell anyone, thinking that they would get tired of it, and they didn't. A full month passed before I told my mother about it. She, of course, was rightly concerned about me and asked me how long it had been going on for. When I told her a month, she grew even more concerned. Her being a single mom, she couldn't pick me up from school because she was at work all day. So her solution was to send my older brother to meet me halfway, thinking this would deter them. It didn't. Another 4 months went by with them continuing to follow me and throw insults. And suddenly, it stopped. A whole month went by without them driving by, and we thought everything was safe again. But we were wrong. Out of the blue, I saw the old beat-up Toyota heading down the road towards me. Only the driver was in the car this time. He slowed down the car, flung open the passenger door, and proceeded to yell for me to get into the car. I was so scared I couldn't even speak. I just shook my head no and tried to walk faster. He continued to follow me, demanding that I get into his car. I'll never forget the look on his face as he yelled at me. It was so full of rage. We finally got to the gas station that I made a break for it. I ran inside the gas station and up to the gas station attendant. I told him what was happening and he let me hide behind the counter. The driver pulled into the gas station, hopped out of the car and came in. He demanded that the gas station attendant tell him where I was, claiming I was his daughter, and I jumped out of his car. The gas station attendant glanced down at me and I shook my head wildly, mouthing that I didn't know this man. The gas station attendant said he didn't know what he was talking about and that he had to leave the store immediately. The driver began to yell wildly and started walking around the store looking for me. The gas station attendant said that he was going to call the police if the man didn't leave. The man turned to him and said something I'll never forget. "I'll get her, one way or another." The driver stormed out of the gas station and left. I sat there on the floor crying for what felt like hours. The gas station attendant called the police and had them come over. When the police arrived, the attendant told them what had happened. A police officer knelt down beside me and asked me my side of the story, and I told the officer everything. How him and a couple of others had been following me for months, how they would follow me and insult me, how they suddenly stopped, and how he had tried to get me into his car. I don't remember much afterwards other than them calling my mother and her meeting at our house. They took my mother's statement and they left. After that, my mother changed her work hours in order to come get me every day. For years, I lived in fear that that man with the greasy hair and pimple-scarred face would eventually get to me. My brother and I worked across the street from a mini storage place, and roughly 2 years ago, we noticed they had an auction sign out front. We decided to check it out, so we walked over hoping to find something interesting. If you haven't watched Storage Wars, the way these work is the auctioneer opens the unit and you're not allowed to enter or touch anything. You only have a window of about 15 seconds to look around and decide if you want to bid. This unit was 4x4, and my brother and I noticed a group of 5 fishing poles amongst other boxes and bags. We had been talking about buying a few poles, and this seemed like a good chance, so we yelled out a low bid and won. Per the auction rules, we had until the end of the day to empty out the unit. Being small, this was a 2 garbage can job, so we got a can and started sorting. It started out promising with finding a nice microscope and a few tools, etc., standard storage stuff. I pulled out a plastic garbage bag and opened it to find another tied shut garbage bag, which I opened to find another tied shut garbage bag. And since nothing terrifying is ever kept in triple tied bags, I opened it to find the dried, mummified remains of a very old and very dry cat. My brother and I just stopped and stared at each other, and since neither of us needed a dried out cat at the moment, we weren't sure how to handle this specific piece of storage unit treasure. We did what we always do when faced with something like this out of context. We just laughed uncomfortably until we looked back into the unit and noticed 2 more tied up garbage bags. At the end of the day, we found 3 total bags with parts of or entire cats. We also aren't doctors, but we're pretty sure there are at least some dog parts in there as well. Granted, saying it was a storage unit full of dead cats would be a bit of an exaggeration, but considering that a storage unit generally has no dead cats, I think a small unit with 3 or 4 could be considered full. As if multiple bags of dead cats wasn't bad enough, the creepiest part about the whole thing was finding his or her creepy drawings of cats and a used pink cat food and water bowl. I spoke with the manager of the storage facility and explained my findings and asked who owned that unit. Obviously, they couldn't give me the name, but when I asked if they were perhaps a vet, the owner laughed and said, "Definitely not." He also said that helps explain why the person's other abandoned unit that had gone up for auction prior had been full of empty plastic cat carriers.
Last December, I fled an abusive relationship and crashed with my friend Amy. She lives in an upper-level duplex that's quite small, and I stayed there for a while with my cat and dog, which was a lot as she has a dog also. Next door to the duplex is an old 4-bedroom house that's owned by Mark, a friend of Amy's who lives abroad. The couple who was renting out Mark's place bought a house and moved out. They suggested to me that it would be a great place for me to stay while I continued my apartment search. I was absolutely elated and agreed immediately. Mine and Amy's dog could play every day, and we could still see each other all the time. I was excited at the opportunity and paid Mark a little rent, but mostly he just wanted to help me out with my situation and someone to house sit until he came home in May. I live in a very cold and snowy climate, so looking for a place in May is exponentially easier. Amy informed me the house had quirks and a creepy basement, and told me if I ever felt creeped out in there all alone, I could come back whenever. She lived in that house for a couple years, so I took her word for it. When one of the tenants showed me the place for the first time, I definitely felt something very off. I chalked it up to the weird layout, the draft, and the lack of sunlight in the rear of the house. Upstairs were 2 bedrooms and a bathroom in the middle. The front bedroom was warm and sunny, and the rest of the upstairs was very cold, noticeably colder than the rest of the house. Upon entering the back upstairs bedroom, it felt like a downward shift. Like the energy in that room felt so strange, and I felt like I wasn't wanted in there, so I barely looked around and just closed the door behind me. The first couple weeks, nothing much happened, but I never felt at ease. I felt like I was being watched. I wrote it off as being easily spooked in a large house, and it was my first time living alone. I started having trouble sleeping despite my room being the only place in the house I felt at ease. One night I decided to smoke some weed and watch a movie in the living room kind of late at night. I fell asleep on the couch and woke up to what I swore was someone running up the stairs and then slamming the back bedroom door. My dog looked startled too and ran upstairs and started growling at the closed door. No one was in there. I decided to lay off the weed, but some nights after that, I heard footsteps pacing in the back room. The next thing that started happening was while I was in the bathtub in the upstairs bathroom. My dog would lay in the doorway and just stare at the back room. Sometimes he'd growl or bark at it. I'd also come home to find the door open when I definitely had shut it, or I'd hear my cat meowing to be let in the room. On a couple occasions, I found my cat shut in the room. Also around this time, my bath towel went missing and I looked absolutely everywhere for it. It began to take a toll on me. I started having nightmares every night, and I'd wake up almost every night to my dog whining between 3 and 4 in the morning. I always felt like I was being watched, and the house felt so heavy. I told Amy about all this, and she confessed to me that she had had some weird experiences in the house when she lived there as well. Her bedroom was the back room, and a couple times she woke up in a semi-dream state to a man at the end of her bed and began talking to him. She then woke up for real and saw a text from her roommate asking who she was talking to. She'd also see things moving out of the corner of her eye, hear footsteps, and feel like she was being watched. She told me of one instance of seeing footsteps in the snow going from the back door to the middle of the lawn and then disappearing. One day I was in the living room, hearing footsteps and Just feeling so overwhelmed by the presence, I was crying and decided to have a go talking to it. I said, "Hey, I know this is your house too. I'm leaving in a month. I've been through so much pain these past few months. Please, just leave me alone. Please let me know you've heard me." Then the door upstairs slammed, and that was the last I heard for a while. My nightmares stopped. I started sleeping through the night and felt less of a presence. One night I was hanging out with Amy in her backyard with our dogs and her downstairs neighbor Sam to celebrate me finding an apartment. I went back in the house for some more beers and to grab a sweater. I went to run up the stairs, and standing there at the top was an opaque black silhouette. I couldn't make out any features, but it was as real as a person standing there. I screamed and ran back down and turned on the stairway light, only to find that no one was there and the back room was open. Finally, my move-out date had arrived, and I felt so relieved to feel absolutely nothing in my new apartment. I went back to the house one last time to check and see if I forgot anything, and there, right in the middle of the floor of the back room, was my bath towel, still slightly damp as if I had just used it. I haven't been back since.
Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/Let'sReadOfficial. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.